Dear Patriots, before the news starts, please subscribe to our patriotic channel by clicking the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up to this video. Don't forget to leave your opinion below in the comments section. Share the news on Facebook and Twitter so you friends see it. Thank you.
Delusional Hillary stumbles out in public insisting she's president, then everyone sees what's in her coat. Once again Hillary Clinton is trying to run a scam on the American people. But this time the scam is really outrageous to the point that clearly shows just how delusional this failed presidential candidate really is. On top of cleverly trying to conceal the fact that she once again fell and had her hand in a cast hidden by her coat, the former Secretary of State spoke at the Women's Club The Wing located in Manhattan yesterday. And as most of you can probably already guess, she wasn't there to speak kindly of President Donald Trump. She attacked him on everything she could manage to think of, from Putin to Fox News. I don't think we've seen the bottom yet. I think it's very unfortunate to contemplate, but more can happen that would put our rights at risk, our freedom at risk, our values, our fundamental views about what it means to be Americans, said Clinton. When he can't think of anything to say, Trump starts chanting it and you sit there and you think, does he think I was elected? She said. I said something publicly a few months ago, Fox News is always trying to impeach me, so someone needs to tell them that it doesn't apply to a private citizen. She actually said that the US is in a very bad spot and we haven't seen the bottom yet when it comes to having Trump as our president. And that he still breaks into chants at his rallies saying lock her up. Like he wants to impeach her. First of all, where was she when we had Obama as our president and for the first time in history a president wasn't able to give us a GDP of over 3% in the 8 years in office? And second, you can only impeach some elected officials, which means this woman actually, in her own mind, believes she was elected president. There really comes a time in everyone's life when the family must have an intervention and confront that person to tell them it's time to pack it up and retire. Maybe it would even be a good idea if they put her in a home, since she can't seem to be able to stay on her feet and always seems to be falling. But what really proves this woman needs help is the fact she is going around saying President Trump wants to impeach her, which he has never said, because she is not the president. Here is a list of things Hillary has blamed since losing the 2016 election via the Daily Mail. Everyone and everything Hillary Clinton has blamed for losing the election, 43 and counting. James Comey. Clinton is furious that Comey, then the FBI director, publicly revealed the reopening of the secret email server investigation just before Election Day, and has said so time after time after time. The FBI. Comey's entire organization does not escape her wrath. The FBI wasn't the Federal Bureau of Ifs or Innuendos. Its job was to find out the facts, she writes, and what happened. Vladimir Putin. There's no doubt in my mind that Putin wanted me to lose and wanted Trump to win, she told USA Today in September last year while promoting what happened. It was hardly a new theme. As early as December, the New York Times obtained audio in which she told her donors, Putin publicly blamed me for the outpouring of outrage by his own people, and that is the direct line between what he said back then and what he did in this election. The Russians. Putin's entire apparatus gets a name check. In May she told the Kodak and Convention how 1,000 Russian agents had filled Facebook with fake news. She told NPR my path toward November was being disrupted with Russians. WikiLeaks. The transparency website is consistently ranked along with Comey by Clinton at the top of her blame list. She told NPR, unfortunately the Comey letter, aided to great measure by the Russian WikiLeaks, raised all those doubts again. And she writes of its founder Julian Assange and what happened. In my view, Assange is a hypocrite who deserves to be held accountable for his actions. Low information voters. You put yourself in the position of a low information voter, and all of a sudden your Facebook feed, your Twitter account is saying, oh my gosh, Hillary Clinton is running a child trafficking operation in Washington with John Podesta, she told the Kodak in Convention in May. Well, you don't believe it, but this has been such an unbelievable election, you kind of go, oh maybe I better look into that. The Electoral College. We have an electoral college problem. It's an anachronism, she told Vox. Anti-American forces. I think it's important that we learn the real lessons from this last campaign because the forces that we are up against are not just interested in influencing our elections and our politics, they're going after our economy and they're going after our unity as a nation, she told Kodekin in May. What is hard for people to really accept, although now after the election there's greater understanding, is that there are forces in our country, put the Russians to one side, who have been fighting rearguard actions for as long as I've been alive because my life coincided with the civil rights movement, with the women's rights movement, with anti-war protesting, with the impeachment. Everyone WHO assumed she would win. I was the victim of a very bored assumption that I was going to win, she told the Kodekin convention. Bad polling numbers. Clinton says polls in key states did not serve her. I think polling is going to have to undergo some revisions in how they actually measure people, she told the Kodekin convention. How they reach people. The best assessments as of right now are that the polling was not that inaccurate, but it was predominantly national polling and I won nationally. Barack Obama. Clinton has two beefs with Obama, one of them being that he won 2 terms. Clinton says that succeeding an incumbent is almost impossible for a Democrat. No non-incumbent Democrat had run successfully to succeed another 2-termer since Vice President Martin Van Buren won in 1836, she writes in What Happened. But she also says his response to the Russian campaign of interference wasn't enough. I do wonder sometimes about what would have happened if President Obama had made a televised address to the nation in the fall of 2016 warning that our democracy was under attack, she writes in What Happened. White women. I believe absent Comey, I might have picked up 1 or 2 points among white women, she told Vox in September. White women are really quite politically dependent on their view of their own security and their own position in society, what works and doesn't work for them. What happened in my election is I was on the way to winning white women until former director of the FBI Jim Comey dropped that very ill-advised letter on October the 28th and my numbers just went down, she said in a March 2018 speech in India. All of a sudden white women who were going to vote for me, and frankly standing up to the men in their lives and the men in their workplaces were being told, she's going to jail, you don't want to vote for her. It's going to be terrible, you can't vote for that. It stopped my momentum and it decreased my vote enough. Because I was ahead and I was winning and I thought I had fought my way back. The New York Times. The newspaper was blamed as early as May at the Kodekin conference in Rancho Palos Verdes, California. She singled out its managing editor Dean Baquet, the paper's most senior editor, and said of coverage of her email issue under his direction, they covered it like it was Pearl Harbor. Joe Biden. Biden could have run against her and didn't. But Clinton writes, Joe Biden said the Democratic Party in 2016 did not talk about what it always stood for, and that was how to maintain a burgeoning middle class. I find this fairly remarkable, considering that Joe himself campaigned for me all over the Midwest and talked plenty about the middle class. Bernie Sanders. His attacks caused lasting damage, making it harder to unify progressives in the general election and paving the way for Trump's crooked Hillary campaign, she writes in What Happened. I don't know if that bothered Bernie or not. Bernie Brothers. Some of his supporters, the so-called Bernie Brothers, took to harassing my supporters online. It got ugly and more than a little sexist, she writes in What Happened. People wanting change. I thought, at end of day, people would say, look, we do want change, and we want the right kind of change, and we want change that is realistic and it's going to make difference in my life and my family's life and my paycheck, she told Vox. That's what I was offering. And I didn't in any way want to feed into this, not just radical political argument that was being made on other side, but very negative cultural argument about who we are as Americans. Misogynists. Asked by CNN's Christina Monpour at the Women for Women International event in New York in May if misogyny was to blame, she said, yes, I do think it played a role. Television executives. When you have a presidential campaign and the total number of minutes on TV news, which is still how most people get their information, covering all of our policies, climate change, anything else, was 32 minutes. I don't blame voters, she told The View. They don't get a broad base of information to make decision on. The more outrageous you are, the more inflammatory you are, the higher the ratings are. Netflix. Hillary does not do Netflix and chill, or if she does, she doesn't find it very relaxing. 8 of the top 10 political documentaries on Netflix were screeds against President Obama and me, she claimed at the Kodakin convention. Facebook. If you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. They were connected to, as we now know, the 1,000 Russian agents who were involved in delivering those messages, she told Kodakin. Twitter. Usually mentioned in the same breath as Facebook, the microblogging site is seen by Clinton as one of the reasons for her loss. She told the Kodakin convention in May that Trump had a method in his tweets. They want to influence your reality. That to me is what we're up against, and we can't let that go unanswered, she said. Content farms in Macedonia. Through content farms, through an enormous investment in falsehoods, fake news, call it what you will, lies, that's a good word too, the other side was using content that was flat out false, she told the Kodakin convention in May. They were conveying this weaponized information and the content of it, and they were running. There's all these stories, about and I've seen them now, and you sit there and it looks like sort of low-level CNN operation, or a fake newspaper. Campaign finance. You had Citizens United come to its full fruition. She told Kodakin in May. So unaccountable money flowing in against me, against other Democrats, in a way that we hadn't seen, and then attached to this weaponized information war. The media. American journalists who eagerly and uncritically repeated whatever WikiLeaks dished out during the campaign could learn from the responsible way the French press handled the hack of Macron, she writes in What Happened. Now President Macron had a massive tranche of his emails hacked and released shortly before the French voted. Many outlets did not report on their contents. Steve Bannon and Breitbart provided the untrue stories, she told the Kodakin convention in May. The Democratic Party. I set up my campaign and we have our own data operation. I get the nomination. So I'm now the nominee of the Democratic Party. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party, Clinton told the Kodakin convention in May. I mean, it was bankrupt. It was on the verge of insolvency. Its data was mediocre to poor, non-existent, wrong. I had to inject money into it. The Republican Party. The Republicans were far better prepared for a campaign than the Democrats, she claimed, when it came to money and data, telling the Kodakin convention. So Trump becomes the nominee and he is basically handed this tried and true, effective foundation. Cambridge Analytica. The data targeting firm ultimately owned by Robert Mercer, the billionaire Breitbart backer, and his family, is said to have targeted voters to drive them away from Clinton. They ultimately added something, and I think again we'd better understand that. The Mercers did not invest all that money for their own amusement, she told the Kodakin convention. Women protesters. The massive demonstrations in Washington and other cities in the wake of the election were organized as an immediate response to Clinton's shock defeat. But that did not stop Clinton from writing in What Happened, I couldn't help but ask where those feelings of solidarity, outrage and passion had been during the election. Matt Lauer. The NBC Today show anchor quizzed both candidates at a Commander-in-Chief forum on board Intrepid in New York. But Clinton, who went first in the back-to-back interviews, complained about Lauer focusing on her secret server and whether it raised questions over her trustworthiness. Lauer had turned what should have been a serious discussion into a pointless ambush. What a waste of time, she writes in What Happened. She later delighted in his firing for sexual misconduct, saying in December, "Every day I believe more in karma." White voters. White voters have been fleeing the Democratic Party ever since Lyndon Johnson predicted they would, she told Vox. Democratic documentary makers. We are not making the documentaries that we're going to get onto Netflix, she told Kodakin. She was asked by the interviewer, This is because Hollywood isn't liberal enough? No, it's because Democrats aren't putting their money there, she replied. Benghazi investigators. The attacks on the U.S. diplomatic compound in the Libyan city of Benghazi on September 11, 2012, happened when Clinton was Secretary of State. It claimed 4 American lives, and was the focus of intense investigation by Congress. Clinton told the Today Show, "Take the Benghazi tragedy, I have one of the top Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, admitting we're going to take that tragedy, because, we've lost people, unfortunately, going back to the Reagan administration, if you talk about recent times, in diplomatic attacks." But boy, it was turned into a political football. And it was aimed at undermining my credibility, my record, my accomplishments. Voter suppression. Suppressing her voters was named by Clinton as one of the major factors in her defeat in her interview on the Today Show when she rattled off her laundry list. "What was at work here?" she said. "In addition to the mistakes that I made, which I recount in the book, what about endemic sexism and misogyny, not just in politics but in our society? What about the unprecedented action of the FBI director? What about the interference of an adversary nation? What about voter suppression?" It was a return to a theme. She suggested it was a problem in Wisconsin in an interview in May with New York Magazine. "I would have won had I not been subjected to the unprecedented attacks by Comey and the Russians, aided and abetted by the suppression of the vote, particularly in Wisconsin," she said. "Republicans learned that if you suppress votes you win." Mitch McConnell. The Senate Majority Leader is accused of stopping the Obama administration from revealing what Clinton says the Russians were up to, helping tip the balance against her because he did not want a third successive Democratic term in the White House. Mitch McConnell, in what I think of as a not only unpatriotic but despicable act of partisan politics, made it clear that if the Obama administration spoke publicly about what they knew, on Russia, he would accuse them of partisan politics, of trying to tip the balance toward me, she told The New Yorker. The Supreme Court. Clinton claims the Supreme Court watered down the Voting Rights Act at the Kodakin Convention. "You had effective suppression of votes," she said. "I was in the Senate when we voted 98-0 under a Republican president, George W. Bush, to extend the Voting Rights Act, and the Supreme Court says, oh, we don't need it anymore, throws it out, and Republican governors and legislatures began doing everything they could to suppress the votes." Clinton appears to be referring to Section 4B of the Act being ruled unconstitutional by the court in 2013, because it relied on out-of-date data, which meant it was not in line with the 15th Amendment. Fathers, husbands, boyfriends, and male bosses. Clinton says that James Comey's actions in reopening the FBI investigation allowed men to influence their wives or girlfriends. "Women will have no empathy for you because they will be under tremendous pressure, and I'm talking principally about white women. They will be under tremendous pressure from fathers, and husbands, and boyfriends and male employers, not to vote for the girl," she told NPR. The Invisible State. Named by her confidant Lanny Davis as the reason she lost at a reading of his book while Hillary nodded along in approval. Pizzagate. The claim that members of the Democratic Party and particularly the Clinton campaign were running a pedophile child trafficking ring out of the basement of a Washington, D.C. pizza restaurant first surfaced before the 2016 election. She told an address to a women-only club in New York in April 2018, "It spread like wildfire. You look in that and think, that's ridiculous. But you have no idea how many people will believe things that are presented as news." HTHannity.com. Harry just found out how Markle really did it to first husband, and now royal wedding is total disaster. As the royal weddings is quickly approaching, news about Meghan's past relationship just became public knowledge, and it may destroy her chances of becoming the princess she always hoped to be. Royal weddings are always quite a spectacle of formalities and steeped in tradition. No detail is left unturned during every step of planning and executing these extravagant affairs which the Queen of England herself has a huge say in. Every last detail must be run past her and receive her approval, and it doesn't end at the wedding. She will have a say in everything they do as long as she is Queen. Many have been shocked all along that the Queen is allowing Harry to marry Meghan because everything about her and her past goes against their previous rules. So is this latest bombshell going to stop the wedding completely, or is the Queen going to look past it also? Is Meghan really that malicious person everyone has been warning Harry about all along? According to Fox News, Meghan Markle ended her 2-year marriage to Hollywood producer Trevor Engelson totally out of the blue, and the then husband felt that he was a piece of something stuck to the bottom of her shoe, a new book written by Princess Diana's biographer claimed. The details about Markle, who is set to marry Prince Harry on May 19, will be released in Meghan, a Hollywood Princess by Andrew Morton. In an excerpt published by the Sunday Times, Morton writes Markle and Engelson met at a dive bar in West Hollywood, California. Markle was attempting to get her acting career moving by going to auditions, nabbing a part as a suitcase model in Deal or No Deal, and taking a side job as a hostess in Beverly Hills for extra money. By 2011, Markle had landed her Suits role and was engaged to Engelson. Meg was on her way up. Tom Jr., Markle's half-brother, was quoted saying in the book. The show, however, filmed in New York and then in Canada. The couple was determined to make it work, even if it meant seeing each other every 2 or 3 weeks, according to the book. The couple married in Jamaica. It was such a moving wedding, a bridesmaid said, according to the excerpt. I started crying the moment I saw her in her dress. But the couple began to fall apart shortly after, according to Morton. Markle's career was taking off while Engelson's was treading water. Markle announced their 2-year marriage was over the summer of 2013, which shocked friends and was totally out of the blue for Engelson, the book claims. The couple was officially divorced a year later. Trevor went from cherishing Meghan to, as one friend observed, feeling like he was a piece of something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Morton writes. A wealthy entrepreneur friend claimed the marriage ended so abruptly that Meghan sent her wedding and engagement rings back to Trevor by registered post. Morton's tell-all book, to be released on April 17, also describes how Markle was affected by her parents' divorce and her life in school. Markle and Harry will tie the knot at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. Kensington Palace announced last week the wedding invitations have been sent out to some 600 guests. Other details, including the florists, were also released ahead of the royal wedding. Recently, it was announced that Prince Harry and Meghan will not be signing a prenuptial agreement, but he might be changing his mind after he learns about this news. Do you think the Queen will make him sign a prenup now? That is if the royal wedding hasn't been cancelled.